Comes to questions for oral answer. Question number 1, in the name of Phil Twyford.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is for the Minister for Social Housing. What reports, if any, has she received about the Salvation Army saying it felt pressured into carrying out expensive, time-consuming research on buying unwanted state houses because the government repeatedly referred to the charity as a likely buyer?
Mr Speaker.
Honourable Paula Bennett.
Mr Speaker, I've not received any such reports. What I have seen reports of, though, is the Salvation Army saying the Salvation Army is supportive of the government's intentions to have community housing organisations involved in the management of social housing. Ironically, a similar statement that has been made in the past from that member himself. The Salvation Army have said that it is keen to pursue housing partnerships between itself, government and other groups, and that it is exactly what our social housing reforms are all about.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Phil Twyford.
Was she consulted before Bill English cynically politicised the good name of the Salvation Army to sugarcoat this government's crumbling policy to flog off thousands of state houses to property developers? And if she was consulted, why didn't she stop him?
Mr Speaker.
Honourable Paula Bennett.
Mr Speaker, the only thing that's crumbling is some of those houses because of the neglect from Labor for so long on the maintenance of them that this government is having to play catch-up, and that is actually the state of those state houses. And so, yes, we've been putting literally billions into maintaining them and making sure that they're warm and that they've got the right things. But at the end of the day, that is what is crumbling, and it's that member's past history in state housing.
Supplementary, Mr Speaker.
Supplementary question, Phil Twyford.
Given the Prime Minister's statement that, and I quote, "this is not about selling to developers," unquote, and Bill English's statement that, quote, "we are in talks with developers," where does she stand on selling state houses to property developers?
Mr Speaker.
Honourable Paula Bennett.
Mr Speaker, this government has always been very clear that it is likely to be a housing consortia that get together, that it will be community housing providers that are leading that, and they must be registered. And when we are looking at the sales of these houses, we are also looking at the tenants that are within them, and that is the difference with it. Yes, we imagine that community housing providers will go into partnership with some developers. I see that happening already, and we already see some quite impressive developments going on that are working alongside community housing providers. It's consistent with both what the Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister have said.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Paul Foster-Bell.
Supplementary to the Minister. What reports has she seen about support from the community housing sector for the government's social housing reforms?
Honourable Paula Bennett.
Mr Speaker, thank you. During our national consultation, I saw just how much support there is from the community housing sector for what the government is doing. I've also seen a press release from approved community housing provider Accessible Properties, which says that Accessible Properties remains committed to pursuing the purchase of housing from the New Zealand Government. We'll keep talking to the government and to the private sector in our commitment to help people in need into good quality homes.
Supplementary question, Phil Twyford.
Does she agree with the Prime Minister's promise that houses sold on would have to be retained for social housing? Or Bill English's statement this week that this would no longer be the case? And was she consulted on the flip-flop?
Honourable Paula Bennett.
There has been no flip-flop, and I know the members struggle to understand the policy that we have when it comes to housing tenants, and that's what this is actually about. So the member might count houses and think that the job's done, but actually we have a number of New Zealanders that are living in completely unsatisfactory conditions for generations, and in my mind are being neglected. We will do better than this. Trust me, I'm consulted and working the whole way through this policy.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Paul Foster-Bell.
Further supplementary to the Minister. What other reports has she seen about support for the government's social housing program?
Honourable Paula Bennett.
I have seen a report agreeing with the direction the government is taking with housing, and it says, and I quote, "We need large-scale urban developments backed by private sector developments and community organisations. Such developments cannot happen without the government playing a role. Private sector developers will invest," it says, and do what they do best, designing and building great places for people. And of course, ladies and gentlemen, that was from Phil Twyford himself.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Phil Twyford.
Isn't it true that, by contrast, her policy will allow private developers and speculators to buy these houses at knockdown prices, sit on them for a short time, kick out the tenants, flog off the houses, pocket the capital gain? And how will this policy help poor and vulnerable families who need secure state and social housing?
Honourable Paula Bennett.
Absolutely not. None of that is true.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Phil Twyford.
Can she confirm that her emergency housing boost announced today is a full $500,000, less than the cost of a two-bedroom unit an hour out of Auckland? And how will that make up for the damage done to Kiwi families living in garages and campgrounds on her watch by her State House sell-off?
Honourable Paula Bennett.
Mr Speaker, by the very policy, if it was true, which of course it's not, it hasn't even started yet, so the $500,000 I'm quite proud of is to support those providers that are providing emergency housing now while we work through a longer, more sustainable funding process.
Question number 2, Derek Ball.
Thank you, Mr Speaker.